Okay. Okay, I think we're good to go. I mean, we're just, making sure that we wait until everyone has joined in.
Zdeňka, Zdeňka, we just hear you typing. So maybe be careful with the microphone.
Sorry. Yeah, if you can mute yourselves until until you speak, that will be good. And that way you can unmute when you're speaking. So they're joining at the moment, so we're gonna wait just a couple of seconds. Yeah. Zdeňka, I think we'll still hear you.
Oh, sorry.
If you mute.
Yeah.
Perfect. So let's wait okay. I think we can start now. Perfect. So welcome everyone to the elections monitor of the Czech parliamentary elections. My name is Javier Carbonell. I'm a policy analyst at the European Policy Center. So after 4 years of a right-wing government led by Spolu, led by Peter Fiala, billionaire businessman Andrej Babiš has won the parliamentary elections, right? So this is the big news that came from yesterday. Although his party has fell short of an overall majority. So ANO, just to give you kind of the rundown of the elections, ANO received under 35% of the vote, Spolu 23%, the Liberal Party stand received 11%. And then there's two interesting parties. The anti-immigrant SPD, led by Czech-Japanese businessman Tomio Kamura, fared worse than expected with 8%. And the anti-EU, anti-Green Deal party, Motorists for Themselves, has entered the national parliament for the first time, winning 7% of the vote. On the other side of the spectrum, the left-wing party's Statsilo movement has failed to cross the parliamentary threshold, meaning that the left now is only represented by the far-right party, which received less than 9% of the vote. So to analyze the elections and its consequences, we're joined by three fantastic speakers. Pavlína Janebová, Research Director at the Association for International Affairs, Zdeňka Trachtová, Czech radio correspondent in Brussels, and Martin Vokálek, Executive Director of Europeum, Institute for European Policy. So I'll just give you a recapitulation of what's going to happen. So we will begin with a few questions for the speakers. Then the speakers will answer the questions for the public, and we will conclude around 3 p.m. So this is kind of complete but short at the same time. Questions will not be live, so you will have to write them, but please feel free to write your questions at any point, right? So you don't have to wait until the speakers are finished. You can write your questions starting from now at the moment. So we'll start with the first block, which is what has happened. Let's start with Zdeňka. So very basic, the big news is Babiš's victory. So why has he won, but failed to achieve a majority? How can we explain kind of the strength of populism far-right country like Czechia, which has full employment and is doing kind of well on some indicators, but not so well on others? So what explains Babiš's victory? I think you're muted, Zdeňka. Zdeňka, sorry, I think you're muted.
Okay.
Now.
Hello, do you hear me now? Yes. Hi, hello everybody. Thank you very much for inviting me to this event. So you, Javier, made several very good questions for best for the political scientists in the Czech Republic. But I can try, of course, to share with you their most frequently shared conclusions on this. Why Babiš didn't get the majority? Czechia is still not Hungary or this type of state where there are two political parties competing basically just with each other. The political spectrum here is much more fragmented. Also, you mentioned that Babiš ANO movement is far right, and it is actually quite common view from outside the Czech Republic. Media often describes him as a far right. For example, just today I have read several articles in foreign media comparing him to Viktor Orbán, but I do not think that is completely true. I believe that pure far-right political party would never have a potential to get 35% of votes in the Czech Republic. Of course, we have far-right. They got together around 14.5% of votes. Andrej Babiš is definitely populist and Eurosceptic. He is trying to be catch-all party, as he says himself. But especially in the last couple of weeks ahead of the election, he again and again tried to articulate that his ANO movement is pro-European and pro-NATO political party, and that he is not pro-Russian. And according to political scientists, he tried to somehow distance himself from extreme, because he believes that the extreme could scare a lot of his voters, which and this strategy proved right. I'm now in Prague. I was at the election night of ANO party on Saturday night. So I was there under the podium, observing the whole spectacle with the Italian pop music and confetti and all the cheering. And Andrej Babiš, during his final press conference, he again claimed ANO is pro-European, ANO is pro-NATO, and if you think differently, you're just copying lies of the Czech journalists. That he said in reply of a foreign journalist, I think it was New York Times. Of course, I do not think that Babiš is pro-European, but he is not anti-European, and he is not clearly pro-Russian. So I think this is one of the reasons of his success. Another one is that, again, according to political experts, not me, but he managed to mobilize all the potential voters he had, and also he managed to get voters who considered far right or far left. So far left, coalition Stačilo, which includes also communists, they didn't even make it over the 5% electoral threshold, and they didn't make it to the parliament. And far right, SPD party, got a much worse result than expected. So their voters probably in the final phase, some of them, they chose to vote for Babiš. So this is another reason for success of ANO movement.
Perfect. Thank you very much for that rundown. Pavlína, I want to ask you now, so what role did the EU place within this campaign? Because, EU was a polemical thing, and especially Ukraine as well, right? So the whole helping effort towards Ukraine that the EU is doing, especially in this kind of quite polemic kind of Czech-led initiative on ammunition sending to Ukraine. So if you could talk to us about that, thank you very much. Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you very much for having me in this event. It's a pleasure to be able to clarify some of the details of the Czech political situation for a foreign audience. When it comes to the EU issues and the EU policies, there were especially, I would say, 3 EU-connected areas that played a role in the campaign. And it was the almost across the board refusal of the Green Deal or an appeal at a re-evaluation of Green Deal policies. For example, ANO and also some other parties outright refused to implement the ETS2. And yeah, but the skepticism towards the Green Deal and to the EU climate policies is shared even by the current governmental parties, so it probably won't be substantially a big change. The second policy area that played a role was migration. Again, there was a refusal of the EU Migration Pact. Also, the Czech population, as well as pretty much the entire Czech political spectrum, is against migration, illegal migration, that means. But the probably most significant, not only European, but international or foreign policy issue in the campaign was Ukraine, as you correctly pointed out. ANO has been criticizing the current government, the level of attention that the current government gave to Ukraine. They claimed that the Czech support for Ukraine was done at the expense of the Czech citizens, and that the welfare of the Czech citizens is actually the one thing that Fiala government failed to take appropriate care about. So the Czech assistance for Ukraine will probably be re-evaluated under a potential ANO government. And you also mentioned the ammunition initiative, which has also been criticized by ANO. question is what will they do with the ammunition initiative? They have claimed that what needs to be found out is to what extent the ammunition is actually transparent and whether it is not working, whether its main sort of purpose isn't the huge profits that some of the defense industry companies get from the initiative. They also suggested, ANO suggested that the ammunition initiative would be much better coordinated at the NATO level, which then some of the defense experts point out wouldn't be realistic because NATO doesn't have appropriate structures to handle something like that. So we will see. My personal opinion is that the ammunition initiative won't be terminated outright in the next months, but it will be like researched, it will be reevaluated, and we will see what changes can be done to the initiative and still keep it running efficiently. Also, when it comes to the position of the Czech political parties and the Czech population in general towards the European Union, I would say the results of the election showed that Czechs really aren't interested in leaving the European Union. There were two political parties that mentioned that they would like to have a referendum about the Czech membership in the European Union. It was Stačilo and it was the SPD. And we see that Stačilo didn't even get into the parliament, and the SPD's result was much lower than expected according to the election models. So I would say that this shows that in these critical international times, the Czech population would like to remain a member of the European Union and also NATO. But this question was aimed at the European Union, so I will stay with that. Thank you.
No, thanks a lot. That's a lot of food for thought. And Martin, I want to ask you about the election in general. So one of the interesting things, maybe coming from abroad, about the Czech elections is the role of the left, right? So the scarce role of left-wing parties in the Czech parliament at the moment. Probably they're only represented by the Pirate Party. So what's up with that section? And also want to ask you about the bigger roles that we have now about elections, talking about polarization, disinformation, the drive towards more authoritarian kind of trends in a lot of European countries. So what can you say about kind of the health of the elections and about the results of the left?
Mm-hmm. Thank you very much for having me here, and I will try to be concise because the role of the left in Czech parliamentary system and in Czech government, it's very problematic, and it would really require a lot of analysis to be written probably and go much deeper into it. But overall, first, I would say that this kind of delineation of right and left is not so much valid in Czechia, but it's also a little bit blurred in other political systems. That's number one. And number two, definitely, is that the traditional socialist left, the Czech Socialist Party, they were the member of the government with first Babiš's government before 2021, and he completely destroyed the party. Like he was usually accusing the party for all the downsides the government did, and they were like really losing a lot of support and so on. So he almost sought the social government, social democrats. And then there are like these kind of more extreme leftist party. We were already discussing about this, the communists who completely failed in these elections, and they failed as well in the previous parliamentary elections. So now in this side, it's not functioning anymore. And you are pretty correct that if we like try to still use the left-right division, we can maybe see that the Pirate Party, which was having quite significant success comparing to the polls before the elections, they were pretty successful, are somehow representing the more like socially left-oriented ideas. They are more, I would say, liberal. But the biggest problem there is that it's still ANO party who was catching up those voters who would be on this kind of black and white, left and right schematic, considered as more pro-leftist. Because as it was already said, Babiš is very, very like a catch-all party. He's like a very populist, and I also agree with Zdeňka when she was saying that he's not a far right, and with his like this kind of left right, it's very difficult to place him on board because in some aspects he really tends to be more like far right or at least centrist. But he was also having a lot of rhetorics and promises which you would be expecting from more like a socially oriented party. So he's like really trying to use it all. So this is the division, and he's now like putting together all the support from different parties, as it was said. And to me, the positive aspect of the election is that, however, the result is probably not great, and there would be some change. I'm really glad that these anti-systemic parties and these anti-EU, anti-NATO parties were having much worse results than it was expected, and especially that Stachel Party, the Communist Party, are not in the government. Now the question, of course, and probably that's for future discussion, is how the government would actually look like. I wanted to also point out there that there is the SPD, which is really like far-right extremist party, who is now discussing the coalition together with ANO and together with motorists, which would secure them the majority. What is good, it won't be a majority which is constitutional. It would be a simple majority only, so they wouldn't be able to sort of steer the Czechia somewhere so much differently, at least for now. But still, there are discussions there, and I have a feeling a little bit from the SPD that, however, they are proclaiming that they want to be active part of the government, they want some ministries. It maybe will not make so much sense to them because they are really like extremist protest party who were always only in the opposition. They were always only complaining. They were always pointing what's not working well, and they got a lot of their electorate stolen already from Babiš now. And if they are a little bit rational about this thing, my personal idea would be that they should stay out of the government and only support Babiš's government, because otherwise it could really kill the support of SPD a little bit similarly as it killed the Social Democrats. As I was explaining there before. So this is to the left and right, and very briefly to the disinformation. And if I can, or just tell me if I'm speaking too much. But okay. To the disinformation, I mean, it was a problem, of course. There were some pressures. There were a lot of pro-Russian narratives or not narratives which were directly pointing out to Russia, but in a public sector, there was a lot of these kind of narratives which were sounded like the pro-Russian narratives. There were a lot of campaigns being evaluated also on the side of those protest parties, especially Stachilo, who are openly pro-Russian, I would say, or mostly openly pro-Russian. There were a lot of fake accounts supporting the political parties. There were a lot of political accounts which were having really huge support. I mean, likes or the followers of the pages, which was completely irrational comparing to the size there. Like same as we see, for example, with some Slovak parties like Prime Minister Fico and so on. They are having hundreds and hundreds, thousands of followers. And usually if you start opening those profiles, they are usually fake profiles. They are bots also from those fake profiles. Sometimes they are using Czech language. On other posts, they are written in Russian. Other posts, they are written in very strange foreign languages. So you see that they are interconnected and they are happening there. So there was definitely an influence. It's very difficult to evaluate how strong the influence is. And as we know, with the foreign malign influence and this kind of social media influence, it's almost impossible to address it directly towards Russian government or towards some kind of real actors. But it was there, but luckily enough, it wasn't so strong enough, or the impact wasn't that significant. That's the most important thing. Second most important thing is also that the election system as such was legit. There were no kind of direct influences of the counting of the votes or how the elections were happening. So this is quite fine, and there are of course no statements from any politicians that there are some questions like it wasn't happening. So that's important, and it has a lot of to do with the Czech orientation. Pavlína was right about it. Czechs overall, as we see in our sociological research with our partners, they are not really strongly either pro-EU or pro-Russian. They are more like that. They are either pro-EU or they are these kind of like people who want to be somewhere in between or who want to be somehow independent. We call it in our agenda, we call it like they want to be a second Switzerland, like this kind of bridge between East and West. Sometimes when it's opportunistic, we go closer to the west, but sometimes maybe we should also listen to the east. And from those data, we are having usually around 6 to 8%, if I'm not mistaken, 6 to 8% of citizens are openly pro-Russian. The rest is either pro-Western, pro-EU, or somewhere in between. So this is very much different. Also comparing, for example, to our brothers and sisters in Slovakia. So this is a little bit different there.
I mean, thank you very much. This is a lot of food for thought. One of the things that I find interesting about Babiš is that in other countries, in other European countries, we tend to have populists that are way more placed within the left or right axis, right? So Podemos versus kind of Le Pen, to put it in a way. But I always think about that it seems much similar to the populist type, the prototypical populist type that we find in Latin American countries, like Noboa in Ecuador, like this kind of businessman that it's very difficult to place. They have a lot of popular support from the left, but at the same time has kind of right-wing policies on the other side. And so it's a bit of a mix and represents this perfect archetypical type of the populist where it's difficult to classify with these schemes. And that's, I think, very interesting. So we'll move now to the second kind of section. Before I do that, I want to mention to everyone in the public, you can send your questions now. We will answer your questions. So anything you want to ask our panelist members, anything that you relate to kind of your own countries or any questions that you might have, please start writing your questions now because we'll pick them up later. So feel free to do that. But I mean, the next question is very clear. It's about the government, right? So Martin already mentioned that Babiš is already having some talks, right, with motorists and the SPD. He also claimed that he wants a minority government. And then we have the Czech president, right, there that has some kind of veto power, and there's some polemics there because he argued that he doesn't want ministers that go against the EU or NATO, right? So Zdeňka, if you can talk us about that, what should we expect in the government formation? Who's going to be in the government, and what will the president do? What's going to happen with that?
So I think my personal guess is that the forming of the government could be quite fast, because it seems that negotiations between Babiš and the far right or semi-far right parties like SPD and motorists are going quite smoothly and well. And these three parties have together a comfortable majority in the Chamber of Deputies. Babiš ANO party won the elections very clearly with a large lead over the others, but he still can't form government on himself. So the Czech Chamber of Deputies has 200 seats and Babiš won 80. So it is not absolute majority, and he needs the support of those two other parties to survive a vote of confidence in the Chamber of Deputies, as Martin mentioned. Also, SPD and motorists, the both parties seem very eager to cooperate with Babiš. So there are two main options how the government could look like. First, minority government of ANO movement with the support of two far-right or semi-far-right parties, SPD led by Tomio Okamura and motorists led by Petr Matsinka. This would be probably the most preferred option for Andrej Babiš. He also said it himself. But it looks like that the more likely is the second option, coalition of those three parties. President Petr Pavel is now in these days, maybe even in these hours, having meetings with all the leaders of all the parties which got to the parliament. And just today, Petr Pavel said during the press conference that it looks like that there will be coalition government of three parties, ANO, SPD, and motorists. Of course, the negotiations are behind closed doors, so we don't know the details, but this is right now the most probable option. Of course, from mathematical point of view, there are also other options. For example, ANO movement with some of the parties from the current government of Petr Fiala, but from political point of view, this is probably not possible because those two parties are not able to cooperate with each other. And one of your questions was when will be the new government formed? My guess will be, as I mentioned, that it could be quite soon, within the couple of weeks, and that we can probably expect Babiš as a new prime minister in Brussels, probably on December EUCO meeting in Brussels.
Okay, thank you very much. Okay, so that would be pretty fast.
Let's see.
Let's see. Let's see.
Could
No,
be, I could be wrong.
Well, I mean, and of course, if the others disagree, and we can bet, let's see who makes it right. So Pavlína, I want to ask you then. You know, it's quite probable, right? So Babiš will be in the government in one way or the other. So what can we expect from this government in terms of policies, right? So will it be a move to the right, a move to the left? We will see a mix of policies on different spheres. So what can we expect from the policies of the new government?
Yeah. Perhaps before I start answering your question, I would like to add something to what Zdeňka said, because I think that there is a third option. There is an option that Andrej Babiš will govern together with motorists, and that SPD will be offered something that will keep them like a indirect support in the parliament. I think that would be preferred by Andrej Babiš because he doesn't want to bother with two coalition partners. And SPD is not just one party. Actually, 1/3 of their newly elected MPs is coming from different parties. So I think this will be a very unstable setup, and it would be a nightmare to have in the government. My personal guess is that it will be an arrangement of ANO and the motorists as a junior coalition partner. But that doesn't really change much when it comes to foreign policy. Actually, it does, because SPD, as we've already discussed, has been advocating for a membership, for a referendum on the membership in the European Union and NATO. And the president had already, before the election, said that he would have a problem appointing ministers from parties who would question the Czech membership in those two institutions. So I guess, leaving SPD out of the government, but somehow gaining their support, would solve a big problem for Andrej Babiš. When it comes to what the foreign policy would look like, I would say it would be much more Eurosceptic, much more openly criticizing Brussels. I think the nature of the rhetorics would be very confrontational, not only when it comes to substance, but even when it comes to like the overall, let's say, approach to the European integration. But there won't be, and I think either Martin or Zdeňka already pointed that out, that ANO in itself isn't pro-Russian, neither are the motorists. So there wouldn't be like a pro-Russian turn in the Czech foreign policy. We've already spoken about Ukraine. I think the rhetorics in support of Ukraine would be significantly toned down, because the current government has been very vocal about the support for Ukraine. So really, this the extent of or let's say the prevalence or the prominence of the Ukraine topic in the government's rhetoric was quite big. So I think this will be lowered down significantly. Also, there likely won't be a continuation of the financial and military help to Ukraine. There will be an increased cooperation inside of the Visegrad group, let's say, or rather with Hungary and with Slovakia, because we can't really speak about Poland given their government. But Babiš has claimed, or ANO has claimed in their election programs, that they would like to intensify again the cooperation between Czechia and Slovakia, and between Czechia and Hungary. They will probably, Andrej Babiš and Viktor Orbán and Robert Fico will probably agree on the anti-Green Deal, anti-migration rhetorics, also in the general anti-Brussels rhetorics. But as I already mentioned, Babiš won't join them when it comes to, for example, blocking the sanctions against Russia. And then also I wanted to mention the transatlantic relations. I think that will be a priority for the ANO government, but it can be a little problematic to fulfill given their ambivalent approach to increasing the defense spending. I think that is an issue on which there isn't an agreement when it comes to ANO voters, because some of them have been opposing the increasing defense spending because their main motivation for voting ANO was, their welfare and the socio-economic situation of the Czech citizens. which they see like being in a direct conflict with an increased defense spending. Also, ANO politicians have been ambivalent about the increase of the defense spending. They say that the GDP percentage isn't an appropriate like indicator for actually the defense capabilities of a country, and that we should pay more attention to how efficiently we actually spend the money that we actually spend. So this will be interesting, I think.
I mean, thank you, and I want to put a similar question to Martin, both in terms of foreign policy. We've touched upon Ukraine, the Visegrad group relationship with Poland and Hungary. That would be very interesting. But also, I mean, if you have any comments on internal policies that might have happened, that might what direction might that take? But I mean, go ahead with what you expect from this new government on everything.
Yeah, like on the international level and on foreign policy, I mostly agree with everything Pavlína was saying, and her analysis is good. But I think it's very important to point out here to the discussion that at least for now, Babiš is not going to become the second Orbán or the second Fico. He will be balancing somewhere in between. Of course, he would be sort of using a little bit of more same rhetoric. Sometimes he would be exactly as Pavlína said, more like acting himself as a little bit of a troublemaker, but especially as somebody who's always fighting for the interests of the Czechs and these kind of Czech national interests. So we would be seeing that. But it doesn't mean that he would be obstructing everything, as Pavlína was saying, or he would be completely, strongly Eurosceptical, because he's really pragmatic. He's pragmatic in a way that he is not open, as it was many times mentioned, to even open the referendum about our membership. He's also business pragmatic in the way that a lot of his economical aspects, economical interests are lying on the common market, are lying in other countries of the EU and so on. And also his business interests are lying in the subventions and support from the EU. So he would be trying to do the best not to lose this. This is one aspect domestically, but it's probably for other debate how he's gonna solve his business interest and how he's gonna solve his position of the owner of a huge agricultural conglomerate and these kind of aspects there, because he cannot now simply just put it into the trust fund as he did last time, and there would be also questions about the huge clash of interest, but this is for something else. But on the European level, I think he would be somehow searching for this kind of pragmatical, a little bit more skeptical way, but not bombing out all the policies there. What is problematic to me is that we are losing now, and we will be losing more on a Czech side, this proactive attitude and these kind of aspects which much improved in past government, that we are able, as I said, from the coalitions with people also outside of the region. We are having diplomats and politicians who are able to articulate their interests, and we are much more proactive player in the European integration, and we would be really much stepping back to the times of Minister Babiš or the Prime Minister Babiš, or the time even of Václav Klaus, who is like those who were always like complaining and like a little bit inactively complaining about what's happening rather than actively trying to involve it. So this is a problematic change of the mindset and attitude. That's number one. And regarding how he would be pushed towards rather closer Fico and Orbán or somehow in between, it will depend also on the coalition partners, as we mentioned many times. So it will really depend on the government. And for keeping the more like European angle of the Czech policy, it would be best, of course, if he's ruling ideally alone, or at least, as Pavlína was mentioning, only with motorists, with some kind of quite support of SPD. That's one point. But the second point is also our European partners. So I'm assuming that it will really depend on the upcoming months, and once Babiš will be going to first EUCO meeting and meeting his partners, it will really depend also on how they will be accepting Babiš and what their attitude towards Czechia would be. So shall they really brand Babiš as second Orbán or Fico? He would be really coming and becoming more of an Orbán and Fico. But if they would be somehow trying to be having more like a partnership approach, maybe Babiš would be sort of more proactive and putting it there. And internally, like to the internal policies, I mean, this is again such a probably different discussion. But overall, what is important to mention that Babiš and his party has won with a lot of promises, and from the economical perspective, it doesn't make sense at all. Like, or if he's supposed to fulfill at least half of the promises he was giving to the voters, it will cost us a lot of money, and it will be very problematic for the Czech state budget. So then the question is whether he would be fulfilling all, and if not, which is most probable, what he will be selecting there. So there will be much more focus on the citizens, and it's also given the fact that Pavlína was mentioning about or talking about it, that he somehow put there this kind of disbalance that we have either our own citizens' interest, our national interest, or we have the European interest, which is rationally completely wrong. Like usually our European interest should be connected, and it's also in security reasons, but also climate related issues and so on. It's really overall interlinked, but he's framing it that it's either us or them. And that would be also visible in this kind of connection of his foreign policy and European policy comparing to the domestic policy. So what I'm expecting is that like there will be a lot of promises which will remain unfulfilled, and there would be also a lot of debt becoming after the Babiš's government. But again, at least for now, it doesn't look that the turnover would be like the turning wouldn't be that strong. And last but not least, it's also given the mandate of an imposition of president, who is going to be here for 2.5 more years. And also there is a two chambers parliament in Czechia. There is a Senate, and at least till the next elections in the end of 2026, Babiš is not having the majority in the Senate, and there is still Senate, which is sort of trying to be this kind of check and balance towards Babiš. And maybe last but not least, we have also quite strong NGO sector, at least comparing to Slovakia, for example. So now, of course, I'm like a little bit pointing out, for example, to me and Pavlína, we have a lot of cooperation also with other partners and so on, and we sort of are here also in case that the Czech government would be completely drifting apart of European interests and so on. We will try to do our best, and together we will try to also steer the steering wheel. However, overall, the times would be more difficult than easier for us.
Thank you very much. I mean, that's a lot to take in. Very interesting. Pavlína, I think you wanted to mention to answer.
Yeah, I wanted to mention like three like steps or priorities of Andrej Babiš's government, future government, when it comes to domestic policy, because in my previous answer I sort of steered towards the external policies. But I would say Andrej Babiš's domestic policies would be like more to the left, more targeted at the left voters. So he would like to, and he has been criticizing the current Fiala government of being not socially sensitive enough. So he would like to, in his program, he promised everything to everyone, as Martin already pointed out, which like fulfilling all these promises is unrealistic. There's no way that he will succeed in that. But he would like to, for example, nationalize the Czech energy company, ČEZ, which currently is owned by the state from 70%, I think. So he would like to like make it completely in the state's ownership, and he claims that that would make the energy prices lower for Czechs. Also, I think there will be an attempt at the pension reform because recently there has been a governmental like a decision or a legislation aiming at increasing the retirement age, which has been very negatively perceived by Babiš's voters. So I think he will try to overturn that, even though that would probably lead to an unsustainable system. It will just, drag, what is the expression, dragging the ball down the road or something, kicking the ball down the road. And the third thing is public media. He would like to change the way the public media is financed, which he would like to make it financed from the state's budget, which theoretically could give him like a more influence on the independence of the media, if he could sort of influence how high the budget is and how big the funding for the media is. So that was just to add.
This brings me back to well, thank you very much for all your questions, for your answers. And thank you all for audience for their questions, because there's a lot of questions already. So we'll start, grouping them and answering them. And please, for everyone in the audience, this is now the moment to ask your question. I'll try to pick it up as much as possible. I'll make these questions and then I'll open the floor for any three of you who wants to answer. But I want to make a big point on this, which is there's one question, which is what's the chance that the president rejects Bebis as a prime minister? And I want to relate this to one of the polemics that Martin mentioned briefly, which is the business ties and the business control of Babis's company, right? So this has been a big issue during the election, and still he has won, but there is this scandal that is related to corruption, and so I wanted to ask, what are the chances that this is the deciding factor that in the end kind of blocks the formation of the government? And secondly, what do you feel Babis's government what will the impact be in the kind of democratic health of the Czech Republic, right? Be in terms of elections, rule of law. Pavlína talked about freedom of expression and kind of possible media control. Where are we kind of trending towards this? I don't know if any of you, Zdeňka, Pavlína, or Martin, let's start with Zdeňka, and then we can, continue.
Yeah, maybe I will take the first question about possible refusal of Babiš as a prime minister. I think that the chances that Petr Pavel will do that are close to zero, because the victory of Babiš was really clear. The parties of the current government don't have majority together. So if there is not a government of Andrej Babiš, the result would be political crisis and probably early elections. So that's the first thing. Of course, president is insisting that Andrej Babiš will solve his conflict of interest. That's his condition. And Andrej Babiš, he promised that he will do that, although he didn't share any details. So we don't know yet how he's planning to do that.
Thanks. Martin or Pavlína, do you want to answer to any of them?
Yeah, I feel it the same, but still, I don't want to underestimate the role of president. I think he will try to play his cards well, but at the end of the day, as long as Babiš would be able to form the majority support for his government, President Pavel would be naming him a prime minister and asking him to form the government by himself. But he can still play an important role there, and he will be doing that. A little bit similar to what he will be doing with the new government, where he's still having this kind of role where he can push back. But overall, we are a parliamentary democracy, which means that the role of the president is not as strong as in some kind of presidential republics. So he will be still a little bit one of these checks and balances in the whole system, rather than somebody who would be creating the complete policy there. But also, like a role of president, we were discussing the foreign policy. Still, there is at least a partial role of Czech president, for example, in foreign policy. So that's important to mention. And I was saying that he will be here for 2.5 more years. So that's quite a positive check and balance, I would say. And to the democratic deficit and how it's going to be impacting the democracy, we mentioned it quite briefly with Pavlína there. To me, at least, the situation is not so positive, like Babiš and people around him, but as well as people from Motors and especially SPD, they are quite vocal about sort of undermining the role of NGOs. They are quite vocal about confronting the public media. We have a Czech television, we have a Czech radio, and Pavlína was saying that correctly, that they are thinking of restructuralizing it a little bit more in the image of how it happened in Slovakia. And it wouldn't be like a best times there, but as it was mentioned several times already, the current or the future government, they don't have the constitutional majority, so they cannot do it very easily. There is a Senate who will be blocking them. There is a lot of NGOs and president as well who will be trying to shift it there, but definitely for the democracy, it would be a little bit worse than the current government, and situation would be a little bit more troubling. But that would be, I think, it would be more like a slow erosion. And I'm a little bit afraid, honestly, that this kind of slow erosion can be sometimes, in long-term perspective, more painful than some kind of really major cuts or major impacts, because this kind of slow erosion wouldn't be visible for broader public. It would be maybe visible to us in NGOs. It would be visible definitely to Zdeňka, representing one of the public media. So we will see it. But the first sight impacts of this erosion won't be so strong that it would bring citizens to the streets, and it will bring these kind of peaceful protests. And again, it's important to maintain that there were a lot of protests against first Babiš's government, but always a peaceful protest. So don't expect anything like a wild as we see sometimes in France or other countries. But this kind of slow erosion is sometimes more problematic because it's a bit like a slow cancer, which is slowly spreading. And once you realize that it has spread, it might be a little bit too late to start fighting it properly.
Pavlína, do you want to add something?
I think Zdeňka and Martin covered it very well. Just perhaps from me, I would agree with Martin that what I think is the most worrying is the legitimization of certain like rhetorics, like mainstreaming of having a prime minister who might be in a conflict of interest and who has been criminally prosecuted, and like making these ideas like normalized in the Czech public discussion. And I think that also goes for the European Union. I think I already mentioned that we can expect much more Eurosceptic rhetorics from the government. And I think in the long term, this can lead to a much more negative approach of the Czech population towards the European Union. I think here also is the role of the president, who has been a very vocal supporter of the European Union. And I think he will make it his, or I would expect him to make it his mission to sort of offer the other side of the coin and really support the European Union and the Czech, like emphasizing the value of the Czech membership in the European Union.
Thank you. I'll continue with one question more about the internal politics, and then we'll go back to the EU and the impact on that, which is, there's one question you mentioned, right? There's three models, possible models for government: minority government with both kind of extremist parties, and with just one. But then the question is, what will Babis have to give them to garner the support, right? So we're expecting relatively short-term negotiations, but even if they're not in government, then what are these parties expecting to get from Babis to exchange for the support? I don't know if you have any idea.
Maybe if I can, and very briefly, then my colleagues would chip in. But there are these layers. Like one layer would be the coalition, meaning that one or two parties, it would need to be like. In either case, if there is a coalition, probably the main ask would be some ministries, some resorts, which is, of course, the potentially most problematic setting, because there is, for example, already some interest to these strong resorts, such as MFA or Ministry of Interior and so on, from those more like a far-right or semi-far-right parties. So that could be problematic overall, and it will really depends also who would be ruling these ministries. For example, for the EU policies, it's in Czechia, the division is that it's some kind of combination of the Office of the Government and Ministry of Foreign Affairs who are doing our European policy. So there it could be a little bit more problematic if there is one party minister at the MFA, for example, for motorists, and then there is Andrej Babiš and his team at the Office of the Government. So this is this kind of setting which is most obvious one. Second layer would be having some experts, having political deputy ministers, for example, at the ministries, and having also people being responsible of the organs of the Chamber of Deputies within the parliament. So these kind of are official roles and people there. So they can maybe say, and it would be especially in case of the government without the majority, which would be only supported by a motorist or SPD or one party. So there would be sitting on different places rather than in government. And they would need to probably combine, and Babiš would need to combine it with some promises on the political priorities the government would be having. So this is the third layer. So sort of agreeing on what is the program of ANO's party and what is the program of motorist and SPD, and what they will be together advocating for. So this kind of like a promises there. So I mean, this can be always a combination. And again, personally, if I should choose, I would much rather see the minority government only supported by those two parties. But let's see how it's gonna work. Like, and I was saying it at the beginning, I'm feeling also, if I was the leader, and I'm not, of course, but if I was a leader of Motorists or SPD, I would be also potentially reluctant to sit in the same government with Babiš, because this one would be really draining my party out, and this would be very difficult to do. And last but not least, would also support Babiš, because he's exactly this kind of opportunist who was doing it in the past, that when something is going well and there is some political success, and doesn't matter if it is domestic or, for example, success on a European level, he's the one saying that he went there personally and he managed it personally and he was successful himself. But any other moment when there is something which is difficult to sell to his voters, he is blaming somebody else. He's blaming the coalition partner, or he was very often blaming the bad Brussels, who is deciding without our without Czech voice and deciding above us. This kind of dogma of about us without us, we say in Czechia. So he's the one exactly like, once it works and when it's positive, it's me, but when it's negative, it's somebody else. So this kind of minority government would be more pushing Babiš to prove himself and to prove, unfortunately, that the promises he was giving to society and the promises which won him the elections are not realistically fulfillable by this 4-year term, and by not sort of creating such a huge debt.
Thank you. I don't know if anyone wants to add anything, or I can go on to the second question.
Yeah, I think Tomio Okamura already mentioned that perhaps even before the election, he said that he would like to be the chairman of the Chamber of Deputies, which also is an important role. And yeah, like not to be cynical, but there is many posts of deputy ministers in the ministries, and also many posts on the boards of state companies or state-owned companies. So that would also be something that could, be offered to, for example, SPD for supporting the government.
Perfect. Then to last, I have a big question to last, which is there's a lot of questions on the impact of Babiš with the possible alliance with other V4 countries in this kind of illiberal V4. What impact would that have in the EU? But there is a couple of concrete questions from people on the impact on the new government's position towards the savings and investment union. So how would that position be there? The government's position on blocking accession talks for Ukraine and Moldova. So to concretize kind of what can we expect, right? So you said it wouldn't be a second Orban, but it would put some problems. So if we go to the concrete, accession talks for Ukraine, the savings and investment union, what about kind of its position towards the defense industry, right? Which probably will be affected by this, with the defense industry within the Czech Republic. So these three elements: so industry, support, and savings and investment union. And then the last question would be, then what can the EU do, right? So what should the EU response be to this Babiš government on these different elements, or other European governments, right? So Macron, Merz, etc. What should be the approach towards the Czech Republic in this scenario? Zdeňka, do you want to start?
Yes, maybe I'll start, and then Pavlína and Martin can continue. I will start from the end. What could EU do? I think that what could EU do is to talk to Babiš, to speak with him, and to really try to make him feel like he's a part of this, I will use the term, European family. Because one thing he doesn't want to be in the same bucket as a Orban or Fico. He doesn't want to be outsider. He wants to be the one who's making the European policy. So that's the one thing. And I also observed it in past days. I can clearly see that Babiš hates when media compared him to Orban. And for example, my experience, very fresh experience from yesterday, I texted him and asked him about who of the European leaders congratulated him to his victory. And I mentioned in that message that I only saw Orbán and Fico congratulating on X. And he got really, really angry and snapped back that I'm manipulating the facts, and that, of course, other leaders congratulated him, not just Orbán and Fico, and that he got like 2,000 messages, and Macron texted him and other politicians texted him. So he really doesn't want to be seen as an outsider and as somebody who is compared to Orbán.
Thank you. I mean, that's very, very interesting and good inside knowledge of Babis. Pavlína or Martin? Pavlína, do you want to?
Yeah. About the savings and investment union, I don't really know. I would have to say that right away. About the accession of Ukraine, I think everything is possible depending on what the public mood is in Czechia. Because the Babiš's electoral base, they are all over the place, which I think we've already mentioned in this discussion. And there might be people who would like perceive the positives of, I don't know, like enlarging the single market, but then also there would be voters who would be, and I think there would be the majority actually, who would be afraid of Ukrainians coming to Czechia and stealing the Czech jobs, to put it simply. So yeah, I think at this point there's no way to presume what Andrej Babiš will think about the accession of Ukraine to the European Union, and whether he would be inclined to, for example, joining Viktor Orbán in blocking the accession. And then there was the question when it comes to defense industry. I think that I don't know what's the question, to what the question specifically aimed. Just that Babiš isn't particularly friendly towards the Czech defense industry because he has some personal disagreements with some of the important personalities in the Czech defense industry. But I wouldn't say that that would prevent him from supporting like EU attempts or European Union attempts at strengthening the defense industry in general.
Thank you very much.
Yeah. If I may to wrap up these questions or two questions, like it's important to also for the EU, but also for the predictions, it's important to be aware who Babiš is and how he's acting and how he's thinking exactly. So there for the EU, but also for these kind of different policies or topics, it is important to highlight that as long as Babiš is having a feeling that he's included, as it was mentioned by Zdeňka, and as long as he has a feeling that he can sell it towards his voters, that he's doing something for them and he's doing something for the society, and he's bringing benefits for the Czech industries. He's decreasing the prices of energies, or he's like really supporting the Czech position across Europe. It will be always easier for him to sell, and it will be attractive for him to do. So if we speak about the banking union or capital markets union, there, like as long as he's sort of selling it as the beneficial steps to be more included, if we sell those steps like more beneficial for the Czech industries, for Czech companies, and for Czech labor force, he can be sort of pushing there and continuing it there. Same goes for the enlargement. Now we have the rather pro-enlargement government, but still, again, if we go even with this government deeper to the questions of the potential change towards the QMB and within the process, or if we sort of speak about economic and social implications of the future enlargement, even this government is rather reserved. So it would be same with Babiš, that he would go even further, like sort of saying that okay, maybe let's enlarge from Ukraine, but what it will bring to us and what will be there in us. So this is exactly for other players. This is also sort of part where EU should be more proactive, explaining what will be the implications of future enlargement on the societies and on current government or current countries. And last but not least, what are the costs of non-enlargement? This is also very important, and it's missing at least from the more broader general discussions. And I think same goes for the industry and defense market or different industries there. Like also slightly connected to our membership in NATO and this increase of the military and security spending there. As long as he sees that it is the only way how to be on board with US and how to be on board with our Western allies, he would be somehow pushing for keeping our obligations, but he would be again selling it. And he said it after the elections. He said it that, like, if it is about building the roads and investing in our hospitals and so on, meaning this kind of 1.5% out of 5%, he's okay with it because it goes for citizens and it is social. So in this regard, if we sell it like this, I think this is the most important for every analyst to keep in mind, that he's not really ideological Orban, or he's not the really like a occultist or like a very like cultist oriented Fico. He's really more like a pragmatic. He's more a businessman. He's more somebody who wants to be visible and who wants to be seen among citizens as somebody who's doing the most for the Czech citizens and doing the most for Czech country.
Thank you very much. I think there are a lot of kind of interesting points, and I think there's an agreement on Babiš as not being compared to Orban as much as kind of probably a lot of kind of European media or media in other countries do. So I think that's very interesting. And we have to finish here. So thank you very much for the speakers for joining us and for answering all the questions. Thank you very much for everyone for joining us. As you all know, the EPC Elections Monitor is an running event that we do on we try to do it on every single European elections. So just keep in touch, and you can join us at the next Elections Monitor. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye.